Hey everybody, welcome back to COM 300 Interviewers and Interviewing. In this lecture video, I'm going to be talking about Chapter 1, an Introduction to Interviewing, and I'm also going to be going over the Professional Development Assignment, which will be due in October. So I want to get started on that because it's something that everyone has to do on their own time. So without further ado, I will get started with the content from Chapter 1. So you do have a Chapter 1 quiz due this week on Wednesday. So you'll have to be prepared, read the chapter first, and some of the content can come from this lecture as well. So, in order to get started with interviewing, we need to talk about the essential characteristics of interviewing. So, there are 4 primary characteristics that separate an interview from your everyday interaction that you have with people in your social circle. So, it's not just a conversation, it's not a speech, it's something different entirely. So the 4 characteristics that we're going to talk about today are, 1, that there are 2 parties in each interview. Number 2, there is a determined purpose and structure in each interview. Number 3, interviews must be interactional, meaning there's back and forth between the 2 parties. And of course, there has to be the asking and answering of questions for it to constitute as an interview. Now, all interviews are going to be different from each other. No 2 interviews are exactly the same. However, they are going to have these 4 basic components to every interview. So first up, we'll talk about the 2 parties. So one party is the interviewer, the person asking the questions, and then the other party is the interviewee, the person who is answering the questions. Now, those roles can flip-flop. For example, in an employment interview, if you're the applicant going in for an interview trying to be selected for the job, you still might be asking the recruiter questions for yourself. But at any rate, there's 2 primary roles that you can serve, the interviewer and the interviewee. Now, this doesn't mean that there has to be only 2 people. So the image on the left, we can see there are only 2 people conversing back and forth with each other. But an interview can also have 2 parties that have many people. In other words, the limit does not exist how many people can be involved in an interview. So you might see a situation like the one on the right in a press conference where a lot of reporters are interviewing either a politician or a sports figure or a celebrity. You also might run into employment interviews where you have a group of people, a group of recruiters for a company that is interviewing just you. Or you might have one person doing a group interview with multiple applicants all together in one room. I'm not personally a fan of those, but they do exist, especially for a lot of internships. So that's the first thing you need to know about interviews. There are 2 parties in each interview, but it can have an unlimited amount of people. Typically, most interviews have just 2 people. Next, we're going to talk about the purpose and structure of an interview. The purpose and structure of every interview is going to vary depending on the topic, the people, the time, place, manner of the interview. But at a minimum, each interview must have a predetermined and serious purpose. So that can range from getting or giving information, seeking employment or seeking an employee. It could be a counseling interview, or it could be a persuasive interview. And there's more purposes, but those are the basic ones that I wanted to mention today. So you have a purpose to be conducting this interview. You also have a structure for the interview, and each interview can come with varying degrees of structure. At a minimum, each interview is going to have an opening, whether that's just a hello or a description of the whole interview and an overview of the topics that you're going to be covering. But you're going to have an opening. You're going to have a selection of topics that you go throughout the interview. You're going to have prepared questions, background information about the subject, the person that you're interviewing, the topic, and the situation. And of course, you're going to have a closing. So next we will talk about how each interview must be interactional. So that means that it's not just one person standing up talking at the other person the whole time. That would be more like public speaking. In interviewing, it's collaborative meaning making. So that means that both parties are sharing and exchanging each other's roles of asking and answering questions, responsibilities, feelings, beliefs, motives, and information. So it's dyadic. There's an exchange going on between the 2 parties. So the interviews are fluid, dynamic, and ongoing interactions, and that's why no two interviews are ever going to be the same. They're more conversational and based on in the moment. You have to come up with on-the-fly probing questions, follow-up questions, So no two interviews are ever going to be the same because you're kind of feeding off of each other in the interaction. So interviews are interactional. And finally, of course, interviews have to have questions. So questions are sort of the basic building blocks of any interview. That's what makes it an interview. So questions can be used to gather information, to give information, to clarify the information that you've already received. And if it's a persuasive interview, questions can be used to change a person's thoughts, feelings, and actions. So therefore, the overall definition that we are rocking with this semester of an interview is an interactional communication process between two parties, at least one of whom has a predetermined and serious purpose that involves the asking and answering of questions. So screenshot this definition, store it with you. It might come up later, maybe on an exam or a future quiz. But this is the definition of the interview with the components that we just discussed. So now we're going to talk about common interview types of interviews and different interview situations that you might find yourself in the future. So first is information giving. An information giving interview would be similar to coaching or teaching. It would be like if I was asking my students, how are you feeling about the group project? What information are you missing? What's going well? What do you need help with? I'm not only asking information to help you, but then I'm giving you information at the same time to help you along in the process of doing your group project. So the same thing goes for coaching. The main purpose is to ask questions to figure out what does this person or what does the other party need from me. Then there's information gathering. So that is actually an interview that we all are going to be doing as a class. You have an information gathering interview in the middle of the semester, and the purpose of that is to obtain information from your interviewee. And this is most common in news interviews, police interviews, things of that nature, where you are trying to collect information from your interviewee. Then you have focus group interviews, which is usually a group of people collected for marketing research purposes, and they're trying to ascertain how does the group feel about our product or service, what is the current general opinion or attitudes towards whatever we're trying to investigate. Then there's the selection interview, also known as the employment interview. I have another slide on that, so I'm not going to talk too much about it right now. You have the performance review. So that's when you already have the job. You've already been working at this job for quite some time. Maybe once a year or twice a year, they do a performance review. They ask you questions. How are things going? Where do you think you need improvement? What do you think you're excelling at? Sometimes they do performance review interviews if they're searching for someone for a new position within the company, or trying to determine who deserves a raise or some sort of benefit from their position. They would do a performance review interview to determine who is qualified for that honor. Then you have counseling interviews. So counseling interviews are common in therapy, in psychiatry, questions such as, how are you doing? How did this make you feel? Etc. I'm sure many of us have been in a counseling interview before. You maybe just didn't know that it was an interview. So the purpose of the counseling interview would be therapeutic. It has therapeutic ends. And then the persuasive interview is quite different. It's really common in sales, where you're trying to sell them on something. It could be you're attempting to persuade them to change their opinions, their beliefs, or their actions on a behavior. But typically, you could think of a car salesman who's asking their potential buyer, what are you looking for in a vehicle? What's your price range? What's your lifestyle like? And then they're going to try to push you in a direction to buy one product over another. Then the two interviews that we should talk about for the purposes of this class would be the telephone and the two-way video interview. So you guys are going to have to perform a two-way video interview for your first major interview project, which is the employment interview. You're going to be partnered up with a peer in the class, and then on a conference call with me, probably on Microsoft Teams, you're going to have to conduct the interview in as professional of a sense as possible. These are actually becoming very common in the world of recruitment and employment, because I think with COVID, a lot of things have shifted online. And instead of having someone come all the way down to an office to interview for a position, they might just start out with a series of video interviews. Then we have email interviews, which are more like surveys. You probably have gotten a lot of them from UWM. It's just very quick questions that you can fill out, and everyone gets the same list of questions and the same options for responses. And of course, webinars, which is basically an online conference where there might involve the asking and answering of questions in a Q&A style. So a little bit more on some of those types of interviews that you will encounter in your life: the selection interview or the employment interview. So this is one that we're going to be doing in our class, the first major project that we have coming up. So in your role as the recruiter, you are attempting to select the best qualified applicant for a job. So for your role for this project, you are going to be interviewing your peer as if you're the recruiter for the job position that they are applying for. So you're going to be asking them questions about their fit for the job, their experience, and you might even create a couple hypothetical scenarios and ask, how would you respond in this situation? Then for the applicant, you are attempting to convince the recruiter that you are the best person for the job at that particular organization. So you're doing a lot more question answering, but you will also have the opportunity to ask some questions of the recruiter, which is your partner, including things about the nature of the role, what are your responsibilities going to be, what's the culture like, or am I going to get to use any of these specific skills that I have on the job, because that's really where I shine. You can ask any of those questions that sell yourself as an applicant and discover, do I really want to work for this organization? So that's your time as the applicant to kind of flip the role on them, interview them, and discover, do I really want to work here? So that is the selection interview. Now, the information gathering interview. This is the second major project that we have in this class, where you're going to be interviewing someone, a professional in your career field, to obtain career advice and any other information to determine, do I want to head into this career path? And if I do, what can I expect once I get there? So overall, the purpose of an information gathering interview is to obtain accurate, insightful, and useful information about your interviewee's responses, attitudes, and feelings. So the method, you're going to develop a list or an interview guide of predetermined questions. You're going to try to think of some probing questions, but a lot of the questions, follow-up questions, are going to be on the fly. So you make them up as you go. So some examples of information gathering interviews that you might have seen would be news interviews, police interviews, pollsters, market researchers, consumers who are going to ask about a product or service that they might want to buy. So those are all information gathering interview situations that you might encounter in your life. Then the information giving interview. This is another one I wanted to bring up because if you are hired onto a role, and let's say that you're asked to be a trainer and train new people coming onto the company, or if you're asked to lead meetings or something of that nature, you might have to do this type of interviewing. So the purpose is to exchange information so that the interviewee or the other party understands and retains the information accurately. So you do this by providing facts, data, reports, schedules, opinions, or technical and philosophical concepts to the other party. So there is the asking and answering of questions, but you're doing so for a purpose more of teaching. So common examples of this would be in coaching, training, orientation, teaching, and briefing, which you all might be asked to do at some point in your career. You have to know how to ask the right questions to be able to give the best, most helpful information possible. And the final type of interview I wanted to talk about is persuasive interview. So some of you might be heading into sales or marketing, so this might be a very helpful tool for you to learn how to do a persuasive interview. So again, the purpose is when one party attempts to alter or reinforce the way the other party thinks, feels, or acts. You do this by asking questions to determine the needs of the interviewee and then attempting to persuade him or her to accept your product or idea. You need to know, what do they need from me and how can my product, idea, or service fill those gaps? So of course, sales is the most important or the most common form of this type of interview, but you also will see this attorneys in a court case, in a fundraiser, in real estate, political lobbying. So it's something to keep in mind. We don't have a persuasive interview project in this class, but it's a type of interview that you at least want to be familiar with. Okay, now we are switching gears and I'm going to talk about the professional development assignment. So this assignment is designed to help you gain professional experience, skills, or knowledge in your career field. And we have 6 different options for you to pick from. So basically, I want this to be as useful as possible for you in whatever you want to do in your academic or professional career. So this is a screenshot of our Canvas page. You can find this under course materials, the professional development assignment descriptions. I have a full list of all the activities, all the instructions are there. I even have links to all the relevant places that you might want to read more about these activities and these events. So be sure to open that up and read it thoroughly. So the 6 options. The first one, you can book a 30-minute resume and cover letter appointment with SET. SET is the Center for Student Experience and Talent on campus, formerly known as Career Services. So what you'll do is you'll book a 30-minute resume or cover letter appointment with them, and then you're just going to submit to me after you go to the appointment an email confirmation, and then you're also going to upload your old resume, your new updated resume after you went to the appointment, and a reflection of what you gained from this, how you think that your resume is going to help you in your career, etc. This is going to be great for career fairs because for a lot of the career fairs, you want to bring your resume, so it's always great to have an updated resume on hand. And we also do have to turn in a resume and cover letter for the employment interview, so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. The second option is to attend a career fair. There are tons of career fair options. I have a list of all the dates and events at the bottom of the document for the professional development activity descriptions. So you will see a list of dates for UWM-sponsored career fairs as well as career fairs that are happening around the Milwaukee area. So you do not have to attend one that is strictly for UWM students. There are plenty of them that go on downtown, and you might see employers there that you want to get in contact with. So what you have to do is attend a career fair, and you have to do a quick, maybe 5-minute interview with at least 3 people or 3 organizations once you're there. So you're going to prepare just a brief list of questions for the employers that you want to speak to. You should look up a list of who's going to be there before you arrive, and then develop a simple list of questions to ask them. So then you would be submitting your interview questions, which is your interview guide, along with your reflection. The third option is to record yourself doing a mock interview on a platform called Big Interview. So Big Interview is a platform that helps people prepare for employment interviews or a multitude of different interview situations that you might find yourself in. So you're going to do the mock interview. You have a bunch of different options to select from. You're going to record yourself doing this interview all the way through. Even if you mess up, it's okay. It's just for practice. And then you're going to submit that interview recording as well as a reflection. Option 4 is to create a profile on Handshake. So Handshake is very similar to LinkedIn, but it's more geared towards students, and employers will sometimes go to Handshake to look specifically for students that are graduating because they have specific roles that they want you to fill. So you're going to fill out a biography, upload your resume, and make several updates to your profile. I put several links to guides of how to improve your Handshake profile in the document, so go check that out if you want to do this option. So you're just going to submit a screenshot of your Handshake profile and then a reflection. Okay, option 5 is to interview a professional in your career field. So this is essentially the same thing as your informational interview that everyone has to do in the middle of the semester. So this would be in addition to that interview. So you can find either UWM alumni, you can find anyone that you can get in contact with within your career field and send them a professional email asking them for an interview. You could even interview one of your professors that you look up to, that you know has some experience, that you want to learn more about. So if you have a professor that you really admire and want to learn more from, this is your chance to interview that person and get some great career advice from them. So what you're going to do is set up a 15 to 20 minute interview. It could be in person or virtual. You're going to pick a career professional that you want to learn more from, and you're going to ask them questions related to their job duties, their career path, any sort of career advice that you want to know from them. So you're going to develop an interview guide, which is your list of questions. You're going to submit that along with proof of the interview, so something like an email confirming that you have the interview set up, and then a reflection afterwards. And then finally, the sixth option is what I call choose your own adventure. So this is kind of a catch-all for anything that I did not list so far. So if you have an idea for a professional development activity that I did not list yet, I would love to hear it. So some examples I could think of would be job shadowing, attending a seminar or a guest lecture on a relevant topic in your field, attending any of the networking events that are either at UWM or in the Milwaukee community. You could attend a conference. You could do some sort of job training or obtain some sort of certificate for your future career path if that's necessary. You could volunteer through an organization that is related to your career field. But if you have any other ideas for a professional development activity that you want to pursue, just shoot me an email and let me know your idea, and we can talk about it and see if it works for this assignment. Because ultimately, I want this to be as helpful as possible for everyone in the class. So if you want to pursue something that I have not talked about, I'm all ears. I'm all for it. I want to point out also about the networking events that UWM does have several networking events available. So you might want to check out, there's a Donuts and Coffee series where you can sit down with recruiters and employers from companies like PwC, M3 Insurance, and US Bank. So it's just a casual setting. You can go and kind of rub elbows with those people, get some contact. So if you do this option, the choose your own adventure, be sure to just check out with me if your activity is okay and meets the assignment guidelines. You'll just provide then in your reflection of this activity a description of what you did, maybe even like a screenshot of the flyer if you went to an event, if that's possible. So yeah, this is the professional development assignment in a nutshell. If anyone has questions about this, please feel free to email me at montgo84@uwm.edu.